Good morning. Welcome back to Coffee with Craig. I am your host, Craig DeLuz. Yeah, right. Anyway, hey, I've been getting a lot of chatter. Been talking to a lot of folks through social media about lawsuits, and I know that right now everyone's taking a look at what just passed through the state legislature. They're looking at the gun apocalypse bills, and everybody's like, sue. We got to sue now. Why aren't we suing now? What are you guys doing? And I get your frustration and I get the angst, and we would love to be able to start doing things. But I guess I wanted to take a step back and help folks understand, kind of some of the challenges that come with filing lawsuits, in particular Second Amendment lawsuits, but also understand kind of a little bit about how that process works. First off, it's important to understand that in any particular case, it's important for a law to be in place before you can in fact file a lawsuit. Number one, because, well, you have to know exactly what you're suing about. There's the legislation that's passed, but then oftentimes there's also the regulations that are then put in place. And sometimes, you may need to find a way through your lawsuit. You have to find a way to make sure that your lawsuit or the litigation that you're involved in deals with both. You want to make sure that it is in fact all encompassing. Who knows, through the regulations, you might actually find a more specific way or a more direct way or an easier path in terms of being able to challenge a particular law. The other reason why you have to wait, and this is one of the things that the courts often gets into, is the fact that, someone actually has to be injured. There has to be a plaintiff. You can't simply sue because something is a bad idea or you believe something is wrong. Someone actually has to be injured. And that's what's going on in this case. Because none of the gun apocalypse laws have taken effect yet, well, you can't sue because, once again, we don't have a plaintiff. I mean, if you look at all the lawsuits, it's rarely is it like, FPC versus Harris or Calguns Foundation versus Brown or a County of Alameda, or whatever the lawsuit is. Usually there's an individual or a business, an individual who's been injured and needs, and that issue needs to be addressed in the courts. So I say that to say, we hear you. We definitely hear you, and we want to do whatever we can, because we also happen to believe, especially in places like California, our best chance, not our only chance, but our best chance to be able to address some of these issues are in fact in the courts, right? Going to the courts, because once again, as you've heard me say a bunch of times, it's hard to get past that whole, thou shalt not infringe, or, part of the Constitution, part of the Second Amendment. But I want you to understand that we at FPC and our sister organizations, the Calguns Foundations and the Firearm Policy Foundation and other organizations, are involved and engaged in litigation. We're involved in fighting everything from the 10-day waiting period to the 1 in 30, the limit on purchase of handguns, the 1 in 30 purchase, the CCW process here in the state of California. Basically, we're working to make California a shall issue state. That's our goal, and that's been once again being done through litigation. We're also working on the 10-day waiting period. I don't know if I mentioned that or not yet, but we're working on the 10-day waiting period. So we've got a number of issues and a number of areas where we are active and where we're engaged. But it's also important that we not just fight on that front, but there are a lot of instances and a lot of cases where we need to fight that may not necessarily seem as obvious. A great example is Teixeira versus the County of Alameda. Now, this is a case where, basically what happened was 3 guys wanted to open a gun store, and because of this 500-foot rule, they weren't able to open their gun store anywhere in the unincorporated county of Alameda. Now think about this. If you don't have the ability if no one can open a gun store, oh, by the way, just to take a step back, none of the existing gun stores met the regulation either, meaning that if they were to go out of business or they were to lose their lease, they would be out of Alameda County, meaning that that the goal of this particular policy was to eliminate the ability to have gun stores, to open a gun store or have a gun store in Alameda County. Now think about this. Yes, you may have a right to bear arms, but where are you going to get those arms to bear or keep if you can't buy them? That's the sort of stuff that a case like that has to deal with. There's another case, Tracy Rifle and Pistol versus Harris. This has to do with the Tracy Rifle and Pistol having a picture of a handgun on their window outside of their business. Now that may seem like a minor thing, but think about this. Think about the fact if they can limit free speech, if they can limit the ability of those who sell firearms to be able to talk about or market firearms. Imagine this. Imagine not being able to talk about, not even being able to talk about the fact that you have a gun store. See, a lot of these things, man, are trying to fight and keep the camel's nose from getting under the tent. What they're doing is they're violating all of our other rights in order to come after and take away our Second Amendment rights. And so it's important for you to understand that the litigation is important, even if it may seem like a minor thing to you, upon reading it. Every single case that we get involved in has a greater, deeper issue. There's a bigger, broader picture that we're trying to address with each of those lawsuits. One of the other questions I had was, well, if you're not filing a lawsuit, why are you raising money now? Well, because as soon as the regs come out, as soon as we have an opportunity to start moving forward, we have to start engaging. And if we don't have the resources, if we wait until the regs come out, if we wait until the law takes effect, and then we start raising money, well, then we're not going to be able to hit the ground running. And that's why a number of organizations are raising money. And that's why it's important for you to understand that particular process. The other thing is this. Understand the lawsuits take a long time. They really do. Right now, we have a court system that is, we'll call it overburdened, but right now it takes a long thing to get anything through the courts. So a lot of times you may not know about some of the lawsuits that we're doing, or we may tell you, hey, we're filing a lawsuit, and then you don't hear from us for a year or two on it, and then all of a sudden we're telling you something's happening, and then you don't hear from us for a while. That's because these things take a long time. But that's also why we fight in the legislature. See, it takes a lot more time and more money to fight to move back these laws in the court system than it did for the anti-civil rights, anti-Second Amendment crowd to actually institute these laws in the legislative process. So, one of the things that we have been able to do, we've been successful working with other organizations, is in killing a number of bills before they even become law. As bad as some of the bills that were passed are, a good portion, I'd say probably 2/3 to half of the bills that were introduced did not become law. And that doesn't even include the ideas that we were able to talk legislators out of. So, once again, it's important to understand that the litigation and the lobbying, in fact, work together. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel. Would love to hear what you guys have to think. I know you guys are interested in hearing about what's going on with litigation. Let's see what kind of comments we have here. We have Chris. Chris says, while court case languish in court, the law is in full effect. That's true. I wish I could tell you it wasn't, but that's what we've got to do. We've got to deal with and address it. It's a long, drawn-out process, and that's why the best way to keep these things from happening is by working to make sure that we have elected representatives who represent our values. If you want them to make decisions that represent your values, you need to actually elect people who represent your values. And if you have those folks where you're at, great. Then you need to look to the district to the north, south, east, and west. Find someone who doesn't represent your values, and find people in those communities who do, and you need to help them. Here we have a schedule update on court cases. I don't know if you're asking me or making a suggestion. That's from Jacob. if you go to, there's two websites in particular that I'm going to encourage you to go to, or three. There's firearmspolicy.org. There's the Firearms Policy Foundation, which is firearmsfoundation.org. And there's also calgunsfoundation.org. If you go to those websites, you'll see all of the litigation that the organizations are currently involved in. And that'll give you an idea of what we're doing and what's going on with those particular cases. And I can tell you, as we get updates, we let you guys know. It's just, updates don't happen as fast on litigation as they do on legislation. Let's see, we've got here, when the new Supreme Court justice is installed, this will change. Well, yes and no, in terms of just to be clear. So we have Frank said that when the new Supreme Court justice is installed, this will change. Well, now, I want you to keep in mind that the new Supreme Court justice is only, if they are the type of jurist that Donald Trump says they'll be, that Justice Scalia was, all that's going to do is return the old balance to the Supreme Court. Now, keep in mind, this is the same Supreme Court that wouldn't take up any cases since McDonald and Heller. They hardly took up any other gun rights cases. So there's going to be need to be a little bit more change in the Supreme Court. But everyone says that Donald Trump is probably going to have the opportunity to appoint not just one, but hopefully 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices. So hopefully it will change. The other thing is that there are still a lot of vacancies in lower courts, in appellate courts, as well as district court judges. These need to be filled, and they need to be filled with people who understand the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I listened to Hugh Hewitt. He had this one thing that he was talking about. He said Donald Trump in his inauguration needs to talk about 100 justices in 100 days. The first 100 days, he needs to appoint 100 justices. Start filling those vacancies and filling them with people who support the Second Amendment. Now, that, in fact, will change things. That, in fact, will make a significant difference. Let's see. Yes, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California. Oh, that's why they call it the Ninth Circus Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit Court of Schlemiels, whatever. It's a challenge, but what's been interesting is every once in a while you get a 3-judge panel that actually makes some reasonable, rational decisions. Now, usually those wind up getting appealed or they go to the full panel, but it's, once again, you do find some interesting rulings coming out of that. In any case, I hope that I was able to answer some of your questions regarding litigation. Once again, litigation isn't sexy. It's not fast. It's not slick. But we have some of the best attorneys in the country on the First Amendment, on the Second Amendment, you name it. We have some of the best attorneys in the country that are fighting on our behalf. I encourage you to go to those websites that I talked about. Not just the Firearms Policy Coalition, but the Firearms Policy Foundation. Go to CalGuns Foundation. Check out the lawsuits, the litigation that we're currently engaged in. And if you like what you see there, if you believe that those are important lawsuits, support them. Because in the end, that's the only way these things happen is with your support. Thanks a lot, folks. It was good talking with you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. If you like these updates, please share them with your friends and subscribe to our YouTube channel.